I mean, I can talk about Teslas for a minute.
Oh, God. I'm not sure I want to start a conversation about Tesla on the internet, if I'm perfectly honest with you.
No, just my experience from Saturday.
Oh, where you saw... When you messaged that, so I was in Edinburgh, and you messaged me saying that you'd seen some Teslas for the first time. And just as I received that, there was a Tesla, like, driving by me. And I couldn't get a picture in time to send you, because that would be funny. But yeah, there was a Tesla.
What? This conversation is happening right now, and we're having it.
Brilliant.
So I sent you a message when I saw the first one. Oh, if this is going to go in, this needs context, doesn't it?
This needs context.
Oh, horrible context. So it would have been on the way back from RoboNerd?
It needs a lot of context, doesn't it? Yeah, so on the way back from RoboNerd, for whatever reason, we were talking about Teslas, and I made a comment that they were quite common, and then you said you'd never seen any, and then we proceeded to see 0 Teslas on the way home, which was annoying.
Yeah, so I had never seen a Tesla on the road. I'd seen them parked up, seen them in dealerships, all of that. Never saw them on the road. And the key thing that you said in that stuck with me is, oh, they're really easy to notice. Because they don't have any air intake on the front. You're like, oh yeah, they're really easy to spot. You know, it's like almost distracting when one comes the other way. And I was like, okay, you know, I'll wait until I see one in the wild. So I was on the way to a football match this Saturday. One of our longest trips, probably about 2 hours each way. And the guy who's driving points out, oh, there's a Tesla in front of us with an awful personalised number plate. And I'm like, ha ha ha, that is a terrible personalised number plate. And as we overtake it, I look in the mirror to get a look at the front of it. It's like, yeah, that's fairly distinctive, but it's still quite similar to a lot of other cars. I don't think I'd just spot that if it was coming the other way and I wasn't paying attention. So I send you a message all excitedly, not because I'm excited, because I'm excited for you that I've finally seen a Tesla. As I send it, another one comes the other way. Now, this one, to be fair, was bright orange and green. So my eye was already drawn to it.
Oh.
It was some horrible corporate thing. It wasn't pleasant.
Brutal.
So my eye's drawn to that, and I'm like, well, I'm going to give that one a pass. It's the colour scheme, not the actual sort of styling of the front that got me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know how long it was after that, I sent you another message because I'd seen a third one. At that point, I stopped sending you messages when I saw them. How many do you think I saw over the course of this 4-hour round trip?
Oh, I don't know, man. So you told me about 3, and I'm not sure if this is like one of those mind games where how many you saw was 3, and you're just asking.
I'll give you a clue. It wasn't 3 because I saw a 4th one not long after sending the 3rd message.
Oh, dear. I don't know. 6, maybe?
11.
11?
11 Teslas.
They're common.
Evidently they are, yeah.
I've started seeing a lot of Model 3s now.
I was say, there was one I saw that was different. One that looked a bit more like what I think people would call an SUV.
Yeah.
Like a bit 4x4-y.
Yeah, it's a Model X.
And that one really stood out to me.
Yeah. That's the one with the gull-wing doors.
Oh. See, that is quite cool.
The gull-wing doors are so divisive. Like, some people are like, I think they're quite cool. And obviously, like, Elon Musk does too. But a lot of people just absolutely hate them. It's
just so frustrating to me that after you said they were so easy to spot, and after I'd seen that one, I was laughing with the other guy in the car about, yeah, I've got his friend. He says they're really easy to spot, but I just don't see it. And then, why do you do these things to me? You've infected me with Elon. That's what you've done.
I'm sorry, but also not sorry.
Oh, well, that's our non-robot quota for the episode. This has been a tough one to get prepared for because we've got a lot of interesting fights. Not all of them necessarily for good reasons, but we've had to pick and choose as we always do. I don't have the usual confidence in our selection of fights today, I'll be honest. There are some good fights that we're skipping.
So some of the fights that we're skipping are fights that don't tell us anything new about anything that I feel like would be a repeat conversation, which is why we're skipping them.
Yeah. We're already going to be having the same judge's decision conversations again.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is we have actually gone for a couple of short fights for once.
Yes.
Which normally we don't do. We've shied away from them. But the short fights we've got are pretty good short fights. Should we jump in?
We should start with episode 15 and Sawblaze versus Son of Waiachi.
This was nice. This was very nice, this fight.
You're not a big fan of Son of Waiachi, are you?
No, and I still couldn't explain why. I don't dislike full-body spinners, but there's something about Son of Waiachi that just seems... This is a word I don't like, but I'm going to use it because it's all I've got. It seems kind of cheap.
Cheap?
As a way of doing a spinner, and obviously not in the literal sense. There's something about it where, even though it's more complicated than a full-body spinner, and more compromised in many ways than a full-body spinner, there's something about it that just goes, oh yeah, there's no finesse to that.
There's no finesse to a full-body spinner.
Exactly. There's less finesse to a full-body spinner. They've made the challenge harder for themselves in the way they've built this, yet somehow it flicks a stupid switch in my brain that shouldn't be there.
You baffle me, you really do. I found this fight quite frustrating to watch to begin with because of Sawblaze.
How so?
So, I'm no expert on combat robotics and driving robots, but if I had Son of Waiachi pinned against the wall for 7 seconds, at some point in there I would have fired the hammer saw over. And it took Sawblaze so long to start using their weapon.
We're going with hammer saw, are we? Okay. Well, look back around to that one soon.
That's what I'm going to go with. I might just change it every time I talk about it.
The weapon is my current choice. Caught minimal controversy. I assume that what Jameson's doing with Sawblaze in that configuration is exactly the same as he does with Megatron. His featherweight, I want to say.
Don't look at me.
I've suddenly become really unsure about weight classes. It's like, I've got Beetle down. I'm comfortable with Beetle now. But everything else has gone from my brain. The way he works with that is that he'll tend to drive without the weapon on, because obviously gyroing doesn't really go well with his driving style, or the driving style required to pin an opponent, really. So he'll tend to drive with the weapon off. In the case of Sawblaze, I think he's driving with it kind of idling, and then he'll use the duration of the pin to get it spun up for one hit. Which then also means that by the time he releases and drives away, the weapon is stopped again, rather than it having to kind of wind down slowly and affecting his driving. So I think in a way, it's a really good demonstration of his confidence in his own driving, that he can look at those pins and go, I don't like where this hit's going to land, I'll get another one. Because it seems like if he's going to be hitting the actual weapon of Son of Waiachi, maybe that's something he doesn't really want to tangle with so much.
Do you think he's intentionally killing time by trying to keep the pin as long as possible? Because obviously you can pin for a certain amount of time, and so I don't believe that it takes 7 seconds for his weapon to spin up. So I don't think he's firing the weapon as soon as he can. I think he's waiting on the weapon, and either, like to your point, either he's waiting for the perfect hit, which is plausible, but I feel like there were a couple of moments in this fight where he had a pretty damn good opportunity and didn't take it. Or if he's waiting till right at the end of how long he's allowed to pin for before firing the weapon, because as soon as he brings that weapon over, the pin is going to be lost. So do you think he's sort of trying to maximize the amount of time he's sort of got his opponent pinned?
Interesting. I don't know.
Because if you could do lots of 10-second pins, that's that's a very cheap win, but it's a very, you're not risking a huge amount. This is a bad example with this particular fight, because obviously it's a full body spinner, you're risking a lot to get the pin in the first place, but like once you've got it, as long as you sort of like let him go briefly for however long it is you need to do and then get back in there, it's sort of like an interesting approach to a fight, maybe.
I don't know if the assumption that it spins up fast is correct, because it does seem like quite a lightweight disc by the standard. It is very narrow, which means it's not going to have that much weight to it. So it might be that they've intentionally undersized the motors to save weight in general, because obviously a robot like Sawblaze needs to be able to take the first hit. So it could be that they've undersized all of that, knowing that the only time they're going to really get it spun up is when they've got time to do so anyway. It might be they've calibrated the whole thing to be quite a slow spin up, but fast enough, and then maximise the amount of weight they can put into the other parts of the robot.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe, I guess it's like, I would imagine it's the same weapon drive motor for both the saw and the whatever. Maybe, I don't know. Because
they want very different things. The saw needs torque and lots of it. Whereas this disc, again, the argument about whether it's a saw is not what I want to get back into, but it is storing energy. And to get energy stored in a weapon like this is a very different thing to trying to get continuous torque into something.
The reason I wonder if it's the same weapon, so I think their other weapon that's not a saw that we'll get to in a minute, I think that is significantly heavier than the saw. So So if they've got the weapon motor for the saw that gets the saw up to speed very quickly and is sized for that, it would make sense to me that then if that's the same motor, that it would then take a lot longer for the heavier spinning implement to get up to speed.
That would make sense, yeah.
But it's still kind of, I don't know, like I'm sure there's a good reason for it. You know, the people building this robot are not idiots, and people driving it are not idiots. Like there will be a reason. It's just frustrating to watch. That's the thing. Like from a viewer's point of view, it's like Sawblaze has got a pin and a good pin and holds it for ages and then doesn't bring the weapon down, which is weird.
They also went for that one move at one point. I don't know how intentional it was. I think with a driver like Jameson, you usually assume that just everything is intentional. Where they had the pin, got the weapon up to speed, and instead of bringing it over the top, they kind of spun it round almost as a traditional vert.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I'm not sure I quite get why you do that.
I wonder if that, again, was just a question of, we've got all this momentum in the disc, it's going to affect our driving, let's at least get it stopped.
Yeah, but why not bring it down? That's what it's designed for.
Good point.
Like, I don't know. It's weird.
This is one of the most theoretical conversations we've had in a long time.
Yep. I mean, in any case, Sawblaze's weapon works. Like they did a great job when they did start using it properly. Like that disc, that thing, that spinning implement is effective against Son of Waiachi.
It was interesting seeing just how different its effect is to Scorpios. Scorpios being the much sort of thicker blade with the single quite blunt tooth.
Yeah.
Which is very clearly about delivering energy. And they sort of had the fight against Copperhead, for example, where they weren't going through the armour because it's Copperhead. But you could see the force from those blows bouncing the opponent around, doing internal damage. It is very clear that the weapon on Sawblaze is designed to do that visible external damage first.
Mm.
And in this case, that also translated into quite significant internal damage.
Yeah, that happens when you slice right through the body of a very compact robot.
You're pretty much always hitting something good.
You're going to hit something important when you do that, yeah.
I think this fight also, though, is just another triumph of the Sawblaze wedge. Or just another demonstration of why horizontals aren't nearly as popular as verts now.
Yeah, I think it's the wedge. I think it's good driving as well, obviously. Like that plays a big... I think just having a beefy wedge isn't enough with a horizontal. You need to be able to use it effectively.
And in this case, using it effectively, of course, meant the most egregious false start in the history of the sport, for which the whole team should be taken outside and shot.
That seems maybe a bit extreme, but yeah, there are a lot of early starts, I think, in BattleBots at the moment.
Are there, though? Have you noticed many going through and just not said much?
There are enough that it's not just this one instance, you know. It's like I feel like there have been other times where I've sort of maybe mentioned it in passing to you, but it's a thing that I've noticed. I mean, it's fine. Like, you know, it's not as if anyone's starting like multiple seconds ahead of time, but it's just, you know, it's just that anticipation of the green light and people, you know, determined for the box rush and stuff. So I get why it happens, and it's not too egregious. But I think there have been a bunch, and I also don't want to try and make claims that it's more of them than usual or fewer of them than usual. It's just I happen to have noticed it a bit more this time for whatever reason.
I must admit, now you're talking about it, I do remember something about a couple of spinners potentially starting to spin up a bit early.
Yeah, Gigabyte started spinning early in one fight.
I had Gigabyte in my head, but I wasn't certain enough to name and shame.
I'm doing it. I'm naming and shaming.
That's all you're here for, the name and shame.
It's well known that's what I do, you know.
You then, of course, have got the supposed late hit. This fight just had loads of weird stuff going on.
Oh yeah, the hit after the buzzer, or was it?
I mean, it just plain wasn't. Such a weird. Obviously, I'm trying now to avoid talking too much about the edit of the show, but that's pretty egregious. That is. That's just straight up making something up and making a team look bad doing it.
That's the thing that really gets me about it, is that doing that edit has repercussions for the teams involved, and and the teams involved have no, to my understanding, they don't really have any control over the edit, and so it's, yeah, I just think it's rubbish to sort of to do that because the obvious repercussion of that is that the team involved is going to get feedback on that and be like, oh, you went in for a late hit, you're a terrible person, when they didn't.
And it isn't like we had last season, for example, we had Ice Wave kind of get a bit of a late hit on Yeti, where it was like, yeah, that clearly did happen and was evidently an accident. You can understand there being a line of commentary about it. Whereas with this, did they honestly think there had been a late hit in the moment and it just got used that way? Or is this something that they've added afterwards?
I don't know. And I'm going to raise the other point quickly. Do we know that it wasn't a late hit?
One of the guys that does all the photography has a couple of photos of that hit taking place with the clock in the background on like 2:58.
Okay. Because what I can't think of is what the motivation is from production to do that.
I mean, the cynical answer is drama.
I know, but like, if you're going to cause... Do they have any... I don't know if they have any sort of like bad guys on this program, but like, if they do, it's not Jameson Go, is it?
They've always tried to sell Ray as a bit of a bad guy.
Yeah, so it's sort of like... The thing that I don't get is like, if you want to manufacture some drama out of a ostensibly late hit, you want to do that with someone that's got the on-screen persona of being a little bit of a rule breaker or something, or a bit of a bad guy, you know? But like, I don't feel like Jameson has that.
You did have the whole thing in the overhaul fight last season where there was a bit of trash talk going on. But it's also just occurred to me that like 3 or 4 episodes ago, we had him getting a birthday cake. So it's like, those two things don't really go together.
Yeah. You
can't sing happy birthday to a guy and then make him the villain.
Yeah. So this is why I don't understand the motivation. It's like, why portray Sawblaze as a villain in this case? And then nothing's come of that. Unless I don't know if they're preparing for something next season, maybe. Will there be a payoff? Are they like starting a story now? Will there be a payoff next season?
Maybe what they'll do is they'll try and set up a grudge match, but they'll admit their error of, oh, it wasn't a late hit, but there was a false start.
I could see a grudge match happening around this, being like, oh, you hit us late, let's have a grudge match about it. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
I also feel the need to point out, as the person that brought it up, I cannot think of anything I hate more than the concept of a grudge match. If you want two robots to fight because it will be cool, make them fight. That's how your format works.
No, you got to have a story, man. Everything's got to be story driven.
This isn't Robot Wars Extreme. It's quite a lot better than that.
No, Robots Extreme was the best robot combat has ever been.
It's Robot Wars Extreme first, Clashbots second, and everything else is just trash.
Exactly. What I particularly love is all the editing that they do in Clashbots. It's my favourite.
I mean, everything needs like animated cat's ears.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Vital.
Makes everything better.
That's why you love King of Bots so much as well. But it's okay, it's all been taken off YouTube now, so you can't even be forced to watch it.
Oh dear, what a shame.
Anything else on this fight before we tangent ourselves to death?
I think not.
Next up, in the whistle-stop tour of the entire top 16, is Death Roll versus Yeti.
Yeah.
This is one of those really exciting matchups of two robots that are just completely weapon-focused and completely aggressive. And it definitely lived up to that billing.
Did it?
Did it not?
I mean, so it was cool to see Yeti utterly dismantled, but equally, again, I'm just gonna, I found some things frustrating about this. One of which is the Yeti's insistence on trying to self-right.
On first viewing, I thought that too, but on second viewing, I'm not sure that Greg is trying to self-right. I think he's just panicking.
Also very plausible.
Because what seems to be happening is big hits from Death Roll flip him, and they tend to leave him facing the other way, so he wants to turn and get his weapon back on them. What happens when you turn? You gyro. In the instances where he's upside down and facing them, he just goes for them.
You've done some close inspection then.
I always do. There are going to be frame-by-frame analyses in this episode, Sam. You know what you're getting into when we go for this.
Why did I agree to start this podcast with you?
Why do you continue to make it? Sunk cost right there.
I don't know. Like I find Yeti's performance in this disappointing. Either whether it's because he spent way too long trying to self-write, or whether it's just because he was panicking and couldn't make everything work properly, or we couldn't. How do I say what I want to say? I just found Yeti's driving disappointing.
To be fair to you, with the self-writing thing, that is what was happening against Duck. So I can immediately see why you would view it that way in particular. It was frustrating there, and here it is happening again.
Yeah.
I can see that being frustrating. To be honest, I was getting enough destruction out of Death Roll to not be that worried about what Yeti was doing. And there was something really viscerally beautiful about seeing Death Roll get that chance to just go in on Yeti while it was completely on its side. Hitting all of those things that are never meant to be hit. And Yeti's not exactly armoured up anyway.
No.
So that level of destruction was beautiful to me.
Yeah, it was a very cool, very destructive fight, and yeah, the state of Yeti at the end of it was in itself a thing of beauty. That very beat up. I'm going to describe it as a twisted frame, even though I suspect it wasn't properly twisted. But you know what I mean? Like it looked like scrap metal at the end.
It was interesting seeing the photos of the aftermath, because I do kind of feel that when you look at it in the show, it doesn't look that bad. So obviously the wheel is off. It isn't like the Sub-Zero Cobalt fight where you can see big chunks torn out. It's all sort of... It's not necessarily the size of one bit of damage. It's the amount of different places that are damaged that really makes it spectacular.
Yeah, it's
because they were just getting hit in such random places because they were gyring around all over the place.
Yeah, it's damaged everywhere, but I do think there's a lot of damage done at the front, like where the weapon mounts and stuff. Like there's a lot of damage there that, I don't know, is aesthetically pleasing, if that makes sense.
The thing I found really weird about this fight is just remembering that Yeti is there. Yeti has managed to fall into that space in my head where I kind of A, forget it exists, and B, forget how good it is. I don't know if that's just a product of having some kind of so-so matchups this season, like the Rainbow fight, for example, where it performed superbly, but that wasn't the kind of matchup that you necessarily remember. It had the Bite Force fight, but that was mostly dominated by the forks getting stuck in things. It had the Duck fight, where Duck just kind of died slowly. I feel like it really deserved to have this spectacular fight, even if it didn't go its way.
I think Robot's mind share on this program, I think, lives and dies by the spectacular fights. And I think if you have a long run of good performances that aren't all that spectacular, then I think it's very easy for a robot to fade into the background of people's minds about this. And I think you're right. I think that Yeti's had good fights. It's a good robot, but it's in the pack when it comes to performance of stuff. Like it doesn't stand out particularly stand out, I don't think, in its performance in general, and it hasn't had overly spectacular fights this time. There's not been a lot of total annihilation or fires or head spinning across the arena, things like that. They don't get that very much, and they haven't had it very much at all in this season. So I can totally see why they'd sort of fade away a little bit.
And that, I suppose, is also in stark contrast to Death Roll.
Yeah.
Where pretty much all of their fights have been memorable, if only for them flying everywhere.
Yeah, like they are just pinballing everywhere around the arena and still going. Like, it's incredible that their weapon keeps spinning constantly, given how often it just comes into contact with immovable objects like the floor, for example, and it keeps going. It's very impressive.
Was it after this fight, or was it next episode where they did start talking about how they'd burned through all their spares?
I think it was at the end of this where it was like, this is the end of the line. And I guess it sort of like shows like the reason they've kept going is because they've had enough spares to keep replacing bits. It's sort of, this really highlights how important it is to have all the spares and how much difference that actually makes behind the scenes, and how much difference like the time you spend in the pit makes to winning these fights.
Without wishing to jump ahead too much, obviously there was a lot of discussion about Bite Force once the whole season was over. and about what the difference is between Bite Force and other teams. And the things that other competitors in particular really highlight is the amount of work they do even after winning a fight.
Mm.
And I think that is something that we've seen a lot more of this season. People doing a lot of preventative maintenance. People taking things that might fail in the next fight and swapping them out before they do.
Yeah. Was it like in a Witch Doctor interview where they mentioned doing that? Maybe?
Possibly. And that might be where I got the nice, neat word for it as well.
I think it was something about Witch Doctor where I think she explicitly said, we've replaced this even though it's not broken because we want this to be the best it can be. Yeah. It's a good idea.
Anything else about Death Roll versus Yeti?
I don't think so.
I suppose then we should go on to one of our short fights.
Let's talk about Tombstone versus Quantum.
This is part of our moral and legal obligation to talk about every single Quantum fight.
Yep.
I don't really want to in many ways.
This was so disappointing.
It's disappointing on a number of levels as well.
Mm.
Obviously, we don't like it when Quantum loses. But more importantly, this had so much potential to be such a good fight. And we were just robbed of that by a really weird hit.
Can you just imagine if the box rush had worked, they pinned Tombstone and then got a bite?
Even if it didn't do anything.
Even if immediately after that exactly this happened, just take this fight, shift it to the right in the timeline, and just stick a little bit before it, where Quantum gets a pin quickly and a bite. That would have made this so much better.
I mentally needed that just to silence the people who gave Quantum no hope. They're like, oh, it's Tombstone. No one has a chance against Tombstone.
Yes.
Tombstone breaks everything it hits the first time. And then it kind of turned out to be true in this instance. And that is the most frustrating thing to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what's really weird, though?
What?
Tombstone joins in the box rush.
Oh, did he just go for it as well?
Quantum goes straight at Tombstone. Tombstone goes straight at Quantum.
Oh, yeah, they meet in the middle, don't they? Pretty much.
Which almost makes me think that Ray knew that if he did that, this might happen. I know I tend to be a bit too generous when it comes to giving people the benefit of the doubt for the cool things that happen in their fights, but it is Ray.
I just think he just went for it.
Maybe he realised that a bit of forward momentum plus an angled wedge equals up. It's not that much of a stretch.
I don't think the momentum of his robot is going to have any bearing on the physics involved when you've got a weapon that heavy spinning that fast.
I mean, it won't have zero influence.
It will have what I believe physicists like to call negligible influence.
What if it was a spherical tombstone in a vacuum?
Oh. Just round the whole thing to zero. I do love, I remember from physics lessons or seeing YouTube videos about some elements of physics, and just the amount of rounding that happens just hurts. I'm not a mathematician really, but the amount of rounding that goes on in physics is painful at times.
Pi is exactly 3.
Oh, I learnt the other day just how little pi you need to know to calculate circumferences of circles to ridiculous accuracies. So I know off the top of my head more pi than is necessary to calculate the circumference of the entire universe to within one atom.
You know what you have to do now?
I'm not reciting pi for you.
Why not?
To what
Just
end?
in case you get it wrong.
3.14159265358979923846264338227950284197169399.
And you know I'm going to be checking that for the show notes.
You are welcome to.
And it's my time I'm wasting.
But the proof of that is actually pi, or at the very least that I have memorised a very long string of numbers, is that I bet you cannot do that many numbers without a repeating pattern back quickly.
I probably couldn't, no. I was going to stop at 3.142.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's not wrong.
It's
rounded correctly.
It's just horribly round. Is it rounded correct?
Yes, because it's 3.14159 something, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just rounded correctly if you're rounding 5 up. I'm just trying to remember what the rules are for whether or not you round 5 up.
You round 5 up.
But not always. Right.
Right. For all the primary school maths I've ever needed to know, you round 5 up.
The problem is if you consistently round 5 up, is that gives your entire data set a bias.
No, because you round half the digits up and half the digits down.
No, you want no.
It's just, you're keeping one of them the same.
No. What you need to do is I think you want to round. You want to change the direction of whether or not you're rounding 5 up or down based around the number, whether or not the number that you're rounding to is odd or even. I forget how it all works. Honestly, like there are like in terms of like statistics and working with big data sets and rounding consistently in one direction introduces a bias that you don't want. So you have to round in a different way.
You had a more intense look of focus doing that than you did reciting the digits of pi.
It's important that people know these things. There is a correct way of rounding, and the way you're taught in school is not it.
I mean, the way you're taught to do most things in school is not the real best proper way.
That's true.
It's good enough.
The other fun thing that I come across quite a lot of work is in terms of like units for like kilobytes and the difference between a kilobyte and a kibibyte. Because people because a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. But a kibibyte...
there's the other 1,024.
24, yeah. And the other one, kibibyte, is 1,024. But people just refer to both as just kilobytes. And this is why when you buy, like, if you buy a hard drive and you look at how much capacity it is, like, it will be measured in... Or, like, the manufacturer will measure it in SI units, so in kilobytes or something like that, and it will be to 1,000, like, be 1,000 whatever. Whereas I believe computers will calculate it by powers of 2, and so that's where a lot of the disparity in how much available space there is comes from. There are other overheads as well, but that's a pretty fundamental one. Why
did I start this conversation?
You're welcome.
It's all genuinely interesting stuff. I appreciate these tangents. I really do. What I can't remember is what we need to transition back into.
Something about Tombstone and Quantum.
Just ouch. That's all we need. Ouch.
Oof, owie.
Big oof.
One might even say a huge oof.
Nice.
Ooh.
Transitioned so fast it gave me whiplash. I've been so determined to never use a line like that. It just seems too easy, and now you've made me do it.
I'm so glad we were all here to witness that. So good.
I'm also glad you set up the transition because I've been holding back from this one.
Go on then. Huge versus Whiplash. I'll spare the audience a long Huge. Go.
Let's start with the good stuff. I love this souped up version of Huge.
Yes.
The extra speed just makes so much of a difference to the overall feel of watching it. It's gone from this horrible lumbering beast that seems like it's more confused than anything into looking as purposeful as it always was, if that makes sense. It now looks what it is, which is a genuinely scary and surprisingly well-driven robot. And that's all I can talk about that isn't the judge's decision. Have you got anything to say about the decision before I go into it?
I am sad about the result, and on first watch, I felt like Huge was robbed. On second watch, I'm not so sure.
I've gone through completely the same journey.
Yeah.
Although I don't think I ever felt that Huge was robbed. I think my feeling the first time I watched it was this could go either way, but it will go to Huge.
Okay.
That was my initial feeling because they'd done all the damage, and we've discussed many times just how hard it is as humans to give the rest of it to the other robot. That idea of being that confident that they get all the rest of the points. I still believe there's a bit of a sort of psychological bias against that, so I really thought that Huge would get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I always felt that, yes, this is a horrible match for a judge because it is so difficult to judge, but at the same time, it's a great one because you can't get it wrong. Whichever one you give it to, there's going to be a really good case for them getting it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, no matter which one you do, people are going to say you're wrong. But for me, when you go through everything, you could give it either way quite happily.
Okay.
And I almost feel like I should stop there. I almost feel like I shouldn't run through the points just based on that, just on principle. But I've written it all out now, so...
How do you think the points are allocated? Or how would you allocate them?
I have not decided how I would allocate them.
I haven't given a great deal of thought to this, but I feel like Hugh should get all the damage points and then Whiplash gets all the other ones.
I think that's what did happen.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what I would do. I agree, Huge gets all the damage points. They've removed a wheel. The spinner has stopped, and I'm confident enough that there were enough hits to that area from Huge that we can say that Huge did that damage. And then very late on, they've also started bending the forks up on the lifter, which doesn't reduce its effectiveness against Huge, but still reduces its effectiveness in general as a lifter.
Yeah.
I feel like that still has to count.
Even without, like, I think the thing is, because Whiplash didn't do anything to meaningfully reduce the functionality of Huge in any way, as far as I'm concerned, even just taking the tyre off is enough for me. Because that did what? Yeah, that's done more to reduce the functionality of Whiplash than Whiplash has done to reduce the functionality of Huge.
And this already brings up one of the key misunderstandings of the judging system. I saw a lot of people, especially straight after the fight, going, well, Huge didn't do that much damage to Whiplash, so they should only get 2 of the points and Whiplash should get the other one. Which I can kind of see the internal logic of that.
Yeah.
But you can't just go giving Whiplash a damage point for not being too badly damaged. That's not really how that goes. I would love to completely overhaul the damage judging, but that's a discussion for another time. So I think it's very easy to say that is 3-0. That's the simple part. Whiplash definitely dominates both aggression and control. Aggression, Huge comes in at a disadvantage just by virtue of being the kind of robot it is. It's not a weapon which needs to be fired, so they can't really show intent very easily, and they're going to have to take time to go away and spin up, which isn't meant to count against them, but it does reduce the frequency of their attacks. It limits them in that respect, so they're always going to struggle for aggression points. Whiplash, meanwhile, they've used the lifter repeatedly. It's very clear when they're doing it, and it's very clear that it's an attacking move. They're attacking very frequently. It's definitely with intent. The stupid definition of boldness also works in their favour because they tend to be putting that lifting arm into the path of the spinner. So it's all really in their favour. But Huge does definitely deliver some forceful blows when they get a chance. And as hard as it is to really demonstrate it, I do feel like their attacks all have intent. So that's the first seed of doubt.
Okay.
That's the first thing where I'm going, I completely feel that Whiplash dominated this, but can I really deny Huge one of those points?
Okay.
With control, Whiplash, as always, is incredibly well controlled. That's just a given. They've compensated for losing the wheel brilliantly. They position themselves in such a way that, with the exception of basically the first hit that takes the wheel off, every hit is on their wedge and not on something squishier. They've done a fantastic job of that. Their weapon usage is effective basically every single time. There's that really, really good lift they get in the sort of about around the minute mark, I think it is, where they have Huge against the wall. They're facing back towards them. They're using the lifter and kind of just pushing them towards the wall. So they let it down, let Huge start to get away, and then lift them again. That's beautiful, and they deserve... If anything, that's a point right there. It's that good. Huge does, at times, get a lot of oversteer. I think with the new sort of faster setup, they tend to go away to get spun up, try and turn, and just turn too far. So that, I think, leaves a bit of a mark. But they do well to turn some situations where Whiplash has got to their side into opportunities to score hits on Whiplash. They're the sort of... It's not really defensive driving, but their kind of reversal of those situations is really good, and you feel like that has to count for something. They've also done quite well to avoid being pushed into the screws on a couple of occasions. So again, lots of things going for Whiplash, definitely dominating it, but Huge just has those couple of things they've done where you're kind of going, can I take this all away from them? And after all of that, I still could not tell you what I think the right decision is. I think I would have given it to Huge, but I also have to acknowledge that I wanted Huge to win in the first place.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm worried that if I'm actually the judge in that situation, I give it to Whiplash just because I'm worried about my bias towards Huge.
I wonder if that is a factor for the judges all the time, but
it's one of those things that's definitely not meant to be, but it almost certainly will be because they're people.
Yeah, humans are not perfect.
Which is why we need AI judges.
No AI, no machine learning.
Farouk's reading the scores out, and the winner is demonetised.
Oh dear. I think that really highlights an issue that we've definitely talked about with the judging in general, which is there's just not enough resolution. Because I agree that like Huge have done little things here and there to sort of feel like, well, it's not a complete lack of control, it's not a complete lack of aggression, but equally, I think that Whiplash exhibits so much more of that you can't do it evenly, because you've only got the 2 points to give. It's either I don't think it's close enough to 50-50 to give 50-50 in terms of the point distribution. Like, you need to give Whiplash the edge in both those things, and the only way to do that is to give them all of the points. So I think that this is the correct decision the correct decision within the constraints of the judging criteria as it stands today, but the judging criteria could probably do with a bit of tweaking.
I'll go as far as saying as well, I think they've made the right call. I think Whiplash performed better in this fight. So this is a case where the judging criteria have made things difficult, but we have got what is probably the right result out of it.
Yeah.
Interesting you say about the resolution thing, though, because the obvious thing to do if you want to fix that is, instead of being 3-2-2, you go 5-3-3.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 5-3-3, I think I'm more likely to give it to Huge. Because I go 5-0-2-1-2-1. Or 5-0-1-2-1-2, technically. You still need to give Whiplash 3 and 3.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's like a combination of more resolution and an adjustment of the weighting.
I don't think they'll do an adjustment of the weighting.
No, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll adjust the weighting, but I think you could, because at the moment, if your opponent gets all the damage, the only way to win is to sweep everything else. And obviously, if you increase the resolution without changing the weighting, you've got the same problem. So it might be interesting to sort of go, you could to have a situation where damage is still the important thing, but you can win on control and aggression without having to get all of the control and aggression points. Maybe, I don't know.
I think part of the issue is just the fact that they are having to give out all of the damage points.
Oh, so if you let the judges assign up to 3 rather than you must give out all 3 points. Yeah.
And potentially do that in other categories as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a discussion I want to have later on about the damage scoring is the whole intent thing again. This is yet another thing where I'm suddenly going, I actually think this could really be improved. And it's strange because I don't remember us ever having these conversations in previous seasons. When we've had conversations about judges' decisions, it's always been about aggression. And that's been true a lot of this season as well. And suddenly the damage thing is really starting to come into focus.
Well, I think because we're just diving deeper into how the judging works and both understanding it a lot more.
I'm saying this is a general thing, not just for us.
And you reckon the community at large is doing this as well?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the controversial decisions have been around damage. They've been about, does damage count for a robot and things like that. Whereas, as I say, previously it's all been aggression.
Yeah.
And the silly definition of it. So it's like, has the nature of the fights changed? Or is it just that they finally fixed the thing that was obviously wrong and now we're having to look at the wider stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say I've noticed the change that you're describing, so...
It only occurred to me while doing notes for this episode.
Yeah.
I could be way off-piste. It's not a fully formed thought yet.
How much do live events vary in their judging criteria, do you reckon? Because I think...
Still not sure that all of them have judging criteria.
Because I think one of the factors for BattleBots in particular, and I guess Robot Wars if it was still going, is that it only happens once a year and there's a lot of money riding on it. And so they're not massively motivated to experiment with different things. I feel like they probably want to be fairly sure that whatever judging criteria they use is going to be effective for whatever it is they're trying to do. So like they've got a set of judging criteria right now that works for the format of BattleBots, and we're going, it'd be nice if there was a bit more resolution, if there was ways of adjusting the weighting and stuff. But like these are quite minor points really in the grand scheme of things. In general, the show is entertaining. It's achieving its goal, so they're not that motivated to change it. But like I wonder if there were live events that did try different approaches to judging, and the BattleBots people had examples of other tournaments using it and going, actually that works. So we've got evidence of that working. We've seen this tournament use it a few times. We're going to try that in our next season with a bit more confidence that it's going to work and not result in some kind of weird stuff happening, you know?
It's worth reiterating what I said last episode in terms of this is the best set of criteria we've had in modern BattleBots so far. They've improved it every time, and it's so much better than it was just because they've sorted out the aggression stuff. It's interesting you say about live events, because I think what works for a live event doesn't necessarily work for TV. They're always going to have the damage focus. Whether we like it or not, they're going to do that because that's what they believe is necessary or helpful to create the show that they want.
Mm.
And as frustrating as that is from a competitive standpoint, they have the right to do that. What I would like to see, what I think works best in general away from TV, is not having criteria at all. And having judges who you trust and going, who do you think won? But that would never work on TV.
The thing is,
it would just inflate the controversy and make it personal even more than it already gets.
I agree that wouldn't work on television. I don't think that would... I think it would work in the real world off of television. I don't think it should be done, though, because the thing about sports is that it's nice if they're reproducible. And humans really like to categorize things and put everything in their buckets and have these kind of rules and stipulations around sports. Like every single sport ever has... I'm going to wind that back. The vast majority of sports have all kinds of weird stipulations around rules and obscure kind of like bits of them because I think you need that. I think you need that level of system so that it's not personal. Because I think if you have judges just going, I think so and so won, I think even off of television, given enough time, that's going to cause an issue at some point. Like there's going to be a huge hoo-ha about something that happened because it's inevitable with society. So it's sort of like if you have a sort of agreed upon system that everyone in the sport or in the community or whatever like follows, then it's easier to go and blame the system than it is to go and... You've got a deflection. If someone's got like a problem with things, you can go, well, this is the system. This is the system's fault. And I think it's... I think you can definitely do like informal tournaments that are just judged like that. But I also think that for actual kind of like tournaments that are sort of like presenting themselves as some kind of official thing, like if it's a tournament organised by one of the like the equivalent of the FRA or something, you know, like some one of these like organised bodies that organises these things. Like they need rules. You can't just have this is judged on opinion.
I'm going to push back a little bit about the term can't. But it's something that organisations are very unlikely to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it would not work specifically for BattleBots. It's too big, the stakes are too high.
Yeah.
I'm not certain on this, I'd need to look into it more, but I think subjective judging is a thing in some sports. I'm thinking stuff like diving and things like that.
I think the thing that made me wind back on these kind of things was actually because obviously like Ultimate is self-refereed and stuff, so like that does come. There are definitely just judgment calls made in that where you might have a situation where someone has technically broken a rule, but whatever kind of thing. So like I just think that's why I wound back and said the majority of sports I think have quite sort of specific rules.
The reason I bring it up is I think it was a UE event where they did this. And the general feeling of people who were involved, as far as I'm aware, this is all second, third-hand information, people involved seem to think it got better, more agreeable results. And I think that is an example of the perfect sort of environment for it. It's a small group where people know each other and already trust the judges as people. So they're not people that are going to go on a personal tirade about how so-and-so judge is massively biased towards hammers because they have a hammer robot themselves. You need that element of trust to already be there and that element of mutual respect, which would definitely not be in place between an audience and BattleBots judges. You know, right now, obviously, the BattleBots judges are very well treated by the public. No one ever questions their motivations for making decisions. Everyone respects them as professionals and builders.
If only that were true.
We're a long way from that.
I think that this kind of subjective judging works, like you said, in very small groups, and like which is I think what I meant when I said like informal tournaments kind of stuff, where it's like here's a group of people that are all themselves builders, bunch of friends, they all know each other, they all they all know. They're all informed, consenting adults, like they all know what's going on, and it works in that situation. But I think if you had like an open tournament where you're having people coming in that you don't know, that aren't like friends of yours, or at least that you've like met a few times, then I think it's at that point that it starts, because then you run into situations where people will come along expecting judging criteria, and then to find that they're not there, and when expectations aren't met, that's when it can start being funky, or and this could work the other way around as well. But I think when you open it up to something that's not just a group of mates getting together to bash robots together, I think that's when you do need the rules.
The other point I was going to make is, would it work better if judges were anonymous? Both the idea of subjective scoring and the system we have now.
I think subjective scoring doesn't work with anonymous judges, because that just makes it just feel really arbitrary.
Not as in, people in masks arena side. You know who the three are, and it's like judge 1, judge 2, judge 3, not knowing who that relates to.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any reason to specify who voted for who. Whenever obviously like on BattleBots they judge whoever voted for this robot and stuff. Like they always, not always, the majority of the time they sort of reveal who voted for who, or who judged it for who, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, that's always seemed unnecessary to me, because that is just asking for trouble.
Yeah, and it's receiving trouble as well.
Yeah,
I personally do find it quite interesting having the opportunity, and it's something I've not done and something I really want to get round to, and that is to go through the decisions and look at what ways judges are voting in certain types of fights, because I think you could genuinely get an idea of how they score on the basis of that. Say you've got a fight like this where one robot has done all the damage. Is it the same judge that's judging it in favour of the one that does all the damage? Because it would show that they have a certain view of the judging criteria that makes them vote that way. Which is fine, because the judging criteria are open to interpretation. They have to be. You can't write judging criteria that aren't, unless you're going to get people sat there ticking boxes every time something happens and just coming up with the score that way. Which is the complete opposite of what we're suggesting.
Yeah.
That could be a future episode. Ryan's in-depth analysis of all the judges' decisions.
Oh my goodness me. Have fun collecting all that data.
That's the problem. I will have fun doing that. That'll be obviously it's going to be a post-BattleBots job. The time that goes into doing notes on an episode of BattleBots can go into doing that instead.
I look forward to it. I look forward to you publishing your results. I expect a well-formatted PDF.
I was going to go for an infographic.
Or an infographic.
Stretch those legs.
Yeah, do it. Right then, we should move on, I think.
To episode 16.
Yes, and first up, we're going to talk about Witch Doctor versus Death Roll.
It's about them judges' decisions. I feel like we had that conversation a fight too early, because this really is what that conversation was about.
Here we go.
So remember I said the last decision was a bit of a dream for a judge because you could not get it wrong. This is one that they could have very easily got wrong. Cards on the table, they got it right. Actually, I'll rephrase that. Cards on the table, I would have judged it the same.
Yeah, so I think yes, I think the judging is correct. There's a small part of me, so I'm happy that Witch Doctor won. Like, I like Witch Doctor, and I'm glad that they've won. I would have also been really excited to see Death Roll in the final as well. That would have been incredible. Given the fact that it came to a judge decision, kind of okay with how they went. There's a small part of me going, should it have gone to a judge decision?
Yeah.
Should Witch Doctor have been counted out? Like, was that proper movement?
And to be clear, you're not talking about the time they spent stationary.
No, I'm fully believe that if that's not been fudged with, that it was like they were stuck there for a while, they were being counted out, and then they did get moving in time. I'm completely on board with that. I'm fine with that. But the problem is once they were moving again, was there proper controlled translational movement? I don't know. It's a really hard thing to judge, and obviously Witch Doctor is getting out of its own circumference and stuff. Like, it is covering ground, but it's hard for me to sort of, I don't know, it's hard to say how controlled that was.
It's impossible. It's just impossible to write a rule that's good enough for this situation.
Yeah.
They've been really explicit this season that turning on the spot is not mobility. Whether they've applied that, that's an open question. But, the rules are now really explicit that you have to be moving around the arena. I think there's one big moment in the closing stages of the fight where they do actively move towards death roll. That I think it's what you would use as evidence for them having control, put it that way. Whether it's actually a sort of display of control or just the fact that you've got to go in a direction that happened to be the right one, hard to say.
So I'm having some thoughts are forming in my head. I think from a viewer's point of view, so I think Witch Doctor's right on the edge here. Like, however you try and decide what controlled translational movement is, I think they're right on the edge of it. And I think from a viewer's point of view, I'm going like, it's probably not. That's not. They're on the wrong side of that. I think just from a viewer's point of view, but from a driver's point of view, we had a situation at RoboNerd in the big rumble thing where I lost drive on one side of the robot, and I did exactly this. You swing it backwards and forwards, and it does shuffle. And
if you'd been counted out, you would have been livid.
Exactly. And this is the thing. So from a driver's point of view, it's like, yeah, that is like, I want the opportunity to get hit one more time, And so it's really hard to know. Like, this situation is so like right on the edge on both of those things. It's just a weird one. But like, I could sort of see it being argued both ways because BattleBots is a TV show, and because having the final bit of, there's a lot of tension obviously coming from the fact that the Witch Doctor was nearly counted out, and I think that kind of makes up for it. If it was just entirely them doing this kind of weird shuffling thing around, it's like, it's a bit dull because obviously Death Roll can't do anything about it either because their weapon's gone at this point. So from a like making a TV show perspective, I could see the argument to be made for counting them out at that point. But from a lot of like live event kind of thing, like being in there in the heat of the moment and recalling my experiences driving robots in similar situations, it's like, yeah, that is movement. Like that's got to count, surely. It's interesting.
There are two common things in football that annoy me. Thing number one is when a referee correctly gives a foul for something in an inconsequential area of the pitch. And someone will go, he wouldn't have given that if it was in the box. Wouldn't have given it a penalty, so he shouldn't give it as a free kick. And the other thing is when a referee will give a decision to a team that is losing, and people will go, if it was 0-0, he wouldn't give that. I feel like this is kind of analogous to both those things. If this happens earlier in the fight, I think they get counted out. If it happens to a robot that is losing the fight already, I think there's more chance they get counted out. But because they're on top in the fight, and because it's near the end, I think the referees, intentionally or otherwise, give them a chance to fight for their lives. And while in so many senses that's not right, because you should be giving the thing if it's in the box or not. You should be giving the thing whether it's to the team that's winning or losing. It would be bullshit for Death Roll to win this fight at the end like that.
Yeah. There's a really interesting, I can't remember if it was an article or a video. I'll see if I can find it for the show notes about the sport of like quick walking,
that's the official name of it. Quick walking, or like power walking. You know what I mean? It's just speed walking.
Or speed walking.
I think it's just walking, technically.
But like, so also, I think speed walking is the best. We're going to go with that. That's the best way of saying this. And obviously, the definition of walking is that at least one foot is on the floor at all times. But if you actually introduce cameras and stuff to that sport, and you look at what people do, basically everyone has both feet off the ground at some point. Like, it just happens. And the point that the article or video, whatever, is trying to make is that these are sort of, most sports are arbitrary rules that are being followed for fun. And when you introduce a very impartial, accurate, and very uniform application of those rules, I think it can suck all the fun out of it. And I think that would probably be what happens here. I think if you had if you had a good definition for what counts as movement and you just applied it uniformly, regardless of anything else that's going on, I think it would suck the fun out of some of these fights.
And I hate that I agree with that, but it is completely correct and completely fair. And that then brings us around to the judges, who have to ignore any feelings they have about that. Because that decision at that point has been made. They have to judge on what happened in the fight.
Yeah.
And the main thing that's happened in those last 30 seconds is Death Roll not going anywhere near the half-crippled robot. And that's what's lost them it to me. Well, I think they were probably going to lose it anyway, because they had been, thrown around quite a lot, damaged quite badly. I don't think they were being completely destroyed by the numbers. I think they were slightly outclassed in aggression, probably a bit more slightly outclassed in control, and damage, rightly or wrongly, was going to go all against them.
So this is a case where I think you could very clearly say, without doubt, Witch Doctor broke Death Roll's weapon.
Now, you see, here's the thing. Death Roll's weapon appears to have broken either on contact with the box that drives the screws or the floor.
No, I think it broke when Witch Doctor got in underneath and embedded itself in the bottom of the robot.
I think it was broken before that. But the point is, it was only hitting those things because Witch Doctor hit it before. So it absolutely, for me, meets the threshold of what counts as damage for Witch Doctor. It's very hard to justify saying that Death Roll caused the drive failure. It's so long after their weapon is gone. And I tend to be liberal with these things. But even for me, it's hard to go benefit of the doubt to Death Roll there.
Yeah, I think something else jammed up that wheel. I don't know what, though.
I mean, I think it's... hate that I'm doing this, but we've seen it before from Witch Doctor. And my immediate reaction in the fight, this isn't something I want to rely on as a judge, my immediate reaction in the fight was, that's Witch Doctor failing again. Same as it was Lockjaw Black Dragon. Black Dragon is hitting Lockjaw, but you still wouldn't go, Black Dragon has broken Lockjaw's drive. Because you've got a bunch of smoke coming out. And when it's smoke, you are kind of going, that's more likely to be an internal failure than damage.
Yeah.
And that is a bit of a reversal of opinion from me, which I'm sure is shocking to the world. But these two fights in particular did kind of crystallise that to me, where my instinctive reaction was, oh, they've malfunctioned. I would expect better from myself as a judge, but...
Good thing you're not a judge on BattleBots.
I genuinely fear that the day will come where I end up judging some kind of competition.
God help us all.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with this decision.
Yeah, I think under the circumstances, I think it's the correct decision.
What I'm not on board with is Discovery's trailer for the episode.
Okay.
Which, as what turned out to be a very effective red herring, did show the Witch Doctor team wiggling their sticks around with nothing happening on the robot.
Okay.
Nice red herring. You know what they also showed? They also showed the Death Roll team very clearly reacting to losing a judge's decision.
Oh,
which
dear.
meant you knew, best case scenario, you knew they were finishing second.
Yeah.
And that was so annoying to me. And it's like, okay, sometimes we see these trailers and we do overanalyze. It was blatant. It was 4 people going, oh,
Yeah.
all stood in a line. It's like, what was that going to be? No one's got a transmitter in their hand. It's just so overtly idiotic on the part of whoever made that and then okayed it to be put out.
I think okayed is be put out, I think is the thing. I'm not going to... I've worked in big corporations. I'm not going to blame the person who actually made it. I suspect they were told to make it.
But will they have been told what clips to put in it?
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there was someone up above doing that. So the power move here is to just not watch trailers. Like, just don't do it. Don't put yourself through it. It's not worth the risk.
Part of me does quite like watching an episode with the intent of working out exactly how much the trailer was bullshitting me. And I also like looking at the teaser photos for fights and then seeing how massively they've hyped up the fight. So the Tombstone Quantum is a great example. They managed to take that 10 seconds of action and get a set of 3 photos that made it look like an even fight. There was one photo of Tombstone's bar kind of sending sparks off of Lockjaw's wedge. Lockjaw's wedge? Quantum's wedge. It's because it's got a jaw that locks. So there was one like that. There was another from an angle where Tombstone was kind of between the camera and Quantum, which implied they might be about to go in the jaws. That's a good little teaser photo as well. There's a photo of the two of them up in the air, which obviously you're not going to assume comes from the same hit as the one on the wedge we saw first, therefore implying it's a longer fight. They do a really good job of making fights look better than they are. Tombstone Sawblaze, another one, made it look like a real back and forth fight, and it just wasn't. So those they do a really good job with. Trailers, however, they suck at.
I don't know, man. I don't like watching things having seen the trailer to try and figure out what came from where, because then that's like a sort of a meta thing that's going on in my head that's not me enjoying the thing I'm trying to watch.
Look, you've got to do something in the ad breaks.
What are these ad breaks you talk of?
What is an advert?
What is an advert?
When was the last time you saw an advert like on your computer?
On my computer? Oh, I think they sneak through from time to time. I think the last time I can remember being sat through ads that really annoyed me was when I was watching something on 4OD.
Oh, 4OD.
Yeah.
They're sneaky. Anyway, should we move on?
Yes.
The other semi-final, Tombstone versus Bite Force.
Yeah.
A weird, spectacular and disappointing fight all rolled into one somehow.
Yeah.
Tombstone's really been a victim of having its short fights hyped up. I feel like it's starting to reflect badly on them a little bit.
How do you mean?
That's probably very unfair. I've been very hyped up for their fights, and they've ended up being short.
Okay.
And I'm trying not to blame it on them. Maybe that's a bit fairer. This had the potential, just like the Quantum fight, to be fantastic. And while it was really interesting, it wasn't the fight it could have been, and it also wasn't the winner that it could have been, let's be honest. Because I think most people come into this not wanting Bite Force to win again. Certainly the reaction to them winning it again has shown that people did not want that.
Yeah, Tombstone was not quite the last hope, but it was, we're getting to the end of like robots that can beat Bite Force, It's like running out of robots now. And yeah, it
says a lot that the robots I wanted to go through from the round of 16 were Huge, Death Roll, and Sawblaze. Death Roll is maybe the outlier in that, but Huge and Sawblaze, I think I was backing purely as Bite Force killers. Even though we all know the odds of any robot beating Bite Force are scarily slim.
I think one of the things about this fight that is particularly disappointing is the way that Tombstone lost. I know obviously having your weapon bar crack is very spectacular. Like that is a spectacular thing, but also it's like if Bite Force won by clawing its way through a fight with Tombstone, that's sort of like, okay, that's fine. But it's sort of like, it feels like a failure of Tombstone rather than a victory from Bite Force, which is maybe not fair. Obviously, Bite Force is an incredibly robust robot to have survived that hit and all that kind of stuff. But like Tombstone having its weapon bar get broken and then vibrate itself to death is not a satisfying loss, I don't think.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't go for a luck angle on it, which I was scared you were going to. Like, this is a lucky win. I think the biggest disappointment for me is that Bite Force came through this with next to no damage, which just makes you feel there's even less hope for the final. It's like Witch Doctor has had a long, tough fight. They've been visibly damaged by it. And you're thinking, well, they're now going into the final at even more of a disadvantage. Whereas Tombstone, if it wasn't going to beat Bite Force, you at least look at that and go, they're probably going to mess something up. Whereas what actually happened is they got completely messed up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to call it a failure of Tombstone, though. Because it's something that's happened to Tombstone before. It happened against Witch Doctor ages ago. But Bite Force has also done this to other robots. It's done it to Rotator, it's done it to Ice Wave. Now, they're both much thinner bars, but it's something that we know their weapon can cause. So I don't want to strip them of credit.
No.
The way it happened, though, is amazing.
Yeah, Ray did a really interesting post on his Facebook, didn't he, about this? And the end that broke is not the end that Bite Force hit.
Yeah. And I was saying earlier about frame by frame, it's not nearly as exciting as I made it sound. Before he did that post, I had really gone through that footage to try and work out what happened, and just about came to the same conclusion. You can see at the end of the fight when Tombstone sat there dead, you can see the obvious chunk out of the end that was hit. It's like a perfectly bite force width sort of chew mark in the end. The way the end of that bar goes is one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in robot combat ever. The fact that it manages to just fly off and go straight through the wheel on the way. I'm not even mad it's that amazing that happened.
Yeah, it's very improbable.
And it's interesting. Obviously, Ray is painted as a bit of a bad guy. I think we all know that really he is someone who can take losing quite well. But even he just seemed to be stood there going, I have no idea what just happened. It's like, yeah, I'm done. I don't know how, don't know why, but I'm done.
Yeah. Shame.
But at least we had the spectacular sort of 20 seconds of Tombstone just flying around the arena with the weapon still on, just trying to do something.
It would be just incredible if, like, in that random chaos, they got some critical hit.
Oh, imagine. This, by the way, brings up one of my issues with the Final 16. I personally, this year and last year, felt the final 16 episodes weren't as enjoyable as the rest. Because what you have is people who are focused on winning and winning in good shape. If this is a normal undercard fight, and maybe if it's anyone but Bite Force, you can't help feeling they go in for a final hit on Tombstone as it vibrates itself to death. Someone just weighs into that madness because that's entertaining.
Yeah.
And because they want to put on a show, and because they want to leave a real impression. Beating Tombstone is already good enough, but you want to leave a real impression. You don't want to be the team that beat Tombstone, you want to be the team that wrecks Tombstone.
I don't think.
Whereas in this, Paul very sensibly sits back because he's got a final to worry about.
I don't think Paul, even if this wasn't the final, even if this was an undercard, he still wouldn't go in for the final hit.
He wouldn't, but you think a lot of people would.
A lot of people would. He wouldn't. He's a very controlled man.
And again, I think that's why, unfortunately, he is a bit of an unpopular champion. That sense of all business all the time, which is completely valid and completely fair. It's his machine. If he wants to take it seriously, then he is more than allowed to. But I think a lot of people, because of the format, have come to expect something different. We've come to expect big, high entertainment fights where entertainment is the goal rather than just a product. You know, I'm going to rephrase that. Paul isn't an unpopular champion. He's an unpopular double champion, and there's a big difference there. A big difference there. I think everyone was happy to see him win, but people don't like seeing most people win twice.
No. Just don't win twice. That's the key here. You know? So the final, I think we can move on, is Bite Force versus Witch Doctor.
Witch Doctor teased us.
There were a good few moments in this fight where I was like, yeah, Witch Doctor, they're going to do it. They're going to beat Bite Force. It's going to happen. I was all excited, all ready for that eventuality. And then the second that they got flipped, for me, I know this is going to sound very sort of like silly and because we've got hindsight stuff, but genuinely at the time, as soon as they got flipped, I was like, that's it. They're done. They're not coming back from this.
There's this sense that to beat Bite Force, everything needs to go perfectly.
Yeah.
And the moment it's not going perfectly, you do kind of go, well, that's it. The tide is turning now and it won't turn back.
Yeah.
You've had your chance and now it's gone.
Because we saw that with Hypershock as well, which again had a good run, was like, yep, they're going to do this. And then at some point it just like they lost an edge and it's like, and it was just an inevitable trudge towards the end where Bite Force wins. And I think it's probably Yeti wasn't quite the thing because that was a judge's decision, wasn't it? So it's sort of
the Yeti fight was a weird one because they kept getting stuck together.
Yeah, but like it's sort of you do almost just need a perfect run to beat Bite Force, it would seem, or be Chomp.
It's not a lucky hit. That's all I'm saying. It's a repeatable hit. Repeatable hit.
Dear. I'm surprised there aren't more memes where Bite Force is Thanos.
I mean, we had one which everyone cried spoilers at, so
Yeah.
no winning really, is there?
Maybe we'll give it time for the spoiler thing to go away, and then I expect to see lots of memes.
This as a final was a bit conflicting for me, in that I didn't really know who I was rooting for, because for the most part I hadn't necessarily been rooting for either. As I said earlier, I'd kind of been looking at a lot of robots who I thought could produce the upset. I was pro-upset all the way. I think that's just an inherent part of being British as much as anything. I was hoping for a new champion. I was hoping that new champion would also be one of my favourite robots, because that's how you do. And I've also been not critical of this version of Witch Doctor, but certainly critical of Witch Doctor in the past. So in that sense, it would have been easier for me, let's say, if they hadn't done quite so well. Both of them absolutely deserve to be in the final, no question. Excellent, excellent machines. But I then just couldn't pick the one for the final and didn't get as invested in it as a result.
Yeah, there's definitely a part of me that is not upset, but sad with the result. Like, Bite Force is a fantastic robot. They deserve the win. But equally, I would love to see someone else win. You know, it was interesting coming in, because I knew who I was rooting for. I was definitely rooting for Witch Doctor to win, but I had that competing against, like, for me, any fight with Bite Force, I just go, Bite Force is going to win. Like, that's just my default position now. I think that's true for a lot of people. So there was definitely sort of that conflict there of, I really want Witch Doctor to win just because I want anyone else to win. But Bite Force is going to, and shockingly they did.
It does at least, I suppose, set up more of an arc for next season of, Bite Force really is on the verge of unbeatable now.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if the traditional way to test the one seed is to throw them other top-level machines. The machines...
Top-tier machines.
I mean, I didn't like top-level enough as it was. To give them machines that have experienced a similar level of success to them.
Yeah.
I do wonder if the answer to challenging Bite Force is to throw more unusual machines at them. Throw them a Chomp, throw them a Huge, throw them a Sawblaze. Because Bite Force is the robot that does the meta better than anyone else. It is the better meta. You aren't going to find a robot that out-Bite Forces Bite Force. So give them something that isn't trying to play their game.
I think there's like a... Because we were mentioning about, like, the work that goes on in the pits behind the scenes as well, and I wonder if there's like an element of like if there's a parallel to be drawn between this and Formula One, where so much of that is won in terms of the engineering and how much time and money you're willing to put into your machine behind the scenes as well. And, like, what would happen if you gave Bite Force a harsher schedule in terms of, we're going to limit the amount of time you've got to repair your machine, and that sounds... I don't think there should actually be like a hard time limit on it, but like I'd be interested to see how they performed if they just so happened to have like 3 or 4 fights in a day, for example. Like, what would that look like?
I think we could do more interest in that. I think we could make them do it all in fancy dress, or like give them a really heavy backpack to wear all the time, or like one shoe with a thicker sole than the other. It's just as arbitrary and pointless.
Yeah.
No, I do see what you mean. I suppose we talk about schedule as in the robots you're fighting, but there is so much more to it than that. We're going to give you lots of damaging machines and we're going to give you little time in between, would, I suppose, be more of a challenge. Although it's a challenge that teams mostly probably answer by, let's have a second frame. Let's have most of the electronics already in it.
Yeah, it's like, let's bring 2 robots and stuff. Like, there's obviously nothing you can really do to stop money from letting you win this. It's like, if you're willing to put a silly amount of money into this, you're likely to do well.
The other thing to do for Bite Force specifically, and this does kind of apply to most of the other sort of high seeds, is don't put them in 1v1s. Put them in rumbles. Yeah,
that's true.
Because they are optimised for the 1v1.
Yeah, and the way that Paul drives Bite Force as well, I think would be... I don't think Paul's a bad driver, but he's not the smoothest driver, and I wonder how he'd deal with multiple threats.
Bite Force is a robot that's so good I've never really analysed the driving.
it's like if you look at Bite Force is a really good example of I think a robot that moves largely in straight lines. Like it doesn't often curve when it drives. It will like stop, it'll spin, it'll drive kind of thing. And that's all, and that's fine. Again, I'm not saying that's bad driving anyway. Like Paul does it very well. Like he drives it precisely. He does exactly what's necessary and nothing more.
Yeah.
And
Good
no
driving is what makes your robot win.
Yeah. So there's there's nothing wrong with it, but like I do wonder like if you put that robot in an arena with multiple opponents, I think it would have to be more dynamic maybe, or maybe it would just be he would just back into the corner and take the Michael Oates approach, like, which is probably what you do thinking about it. Like I don't know, but yeah, I think you're right. Throwing other challenges I think would be an interesting thing to see.
And that's a problem that hopefully they do have to solve for another season, because we don't completely know that's going to happen yet.
I mean, they are advertising for applications, which I don't think they've done in earlier seasons.
I think they were doing that last season, but not like as a part of the ad break, like not as overtly. I think they're always soliciting applications, but this has definitely been a much more aggressive version of that.
This might be the first time that it's made it into the version that I watch then.
Also could be that, but they've definitely been more in your face about it, and they've also put more effort into it, if that makes sense. This is like the first flashy applications trailer we've really had.
Yeah, and I hope that the result of that will be a much more diverse field in the next season if they do another one.
You say that like this one hasn't been diverse.
It has, but like, more crazy machines, I think that would be cool.
Be interesting to see if they go for the same size of field again. Because in a way, you kind of feel like this one's been a bit too big. There have been so many robots that we've not really seen. But that might not be something they're worried about. So as a viewer, or at least as a viewer who follows it outside of the show, that's a real shame. But I suppose for a lot of viewers, they don't know the robots they aren't seeing exist anyway.
I think the advantage of having a large field is that they have much more scope to craft and tell the stories they want to tell. And they don't need, like, if you've got a small field, you're relying on all of those robots having good fights fairly consistently in order to have an entertaining show. Whereas if you have a large field, I think you can more reliably get an entertaining TV show out of that if you've got a huge field, because you can take those lot of random one-off kind of crazy robots like Mammoth that like, if you had a small field, I wouldn't put Mammoth in it because there's no guarantee it's going to do well. But if you've got a large field, bring it in. If it does rubbishly, don't air it, not a problem. If it does well, stick it in the show because you get the, and it's sort of like, I think it allows them that bit of extra flexibility. Obviously, the cost of that is that there are a bunch of robots that we didn't really see, which is a shame. But like, it's a TV show first. You've got to keep reminding myself of that. It's a TV show first. And having a huge field that they can cut stuff from, I think, is a good technique for making a better TV show.
I suppose as well, we do at least have things like the supporter system now where we are going to get to see those fights. I mean, we'll get to see them on YouTube eventually anyway, but those fights are going to come out to an audience that is really ready for it.
Yeah.
Which I think is important. If I were one of the teams who hadn't made the show properly, I'd feel a lot better knowing that there are people eagerly awaiting that content than just waiting for it to go on YouTube, all of them at once like they did last season, where any fight with Chomp in it has got a couple of 100,000 views and others are sat there on like 10 because it's a fight that no one was really waiting for.
Mm.
Or at least it isn't the one they clicked on first out of the bunch.
Yeah.
Anything else to add in general in life?
Well done, Bite Force. It's a deserved win. I feel like we've possibly been a little bit negative about it, but like it's a deserved win. Well done.
Absolutely. I've had my doubts over the season about whether this is a legitimate sporting competition, but the fact that the best robot has won it at least shows it's got a good dose of legitimacy to it.
The best robot won it, and it also did not have an easy ride to the end. Like, it had to fight harder this year than it did last year, I think. So, like, yeah, well done.
We might have a short episode on our hands.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/58. And there you can find links to all the things we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite brand of sock.